I think it's fair to say that the days of token maxing are moving on, and AI agents are costing more in production than enterprises ever expected. Often it's only at the end of the month when you receive the bill that you realize quite how much you've spent. And this is a huge problem as organizations are struggling to get the balance right between value and cost as they implement and scale AI within their organizations. A couple of stats that I read this morning from Gartner: 56% of organizations don't have any AI FinOps practices or tools at all, and only 17% of data analytics leaders have effective cost optimization strategies. So clearly, we have a lot of work to do in order to be able to kind of manage the task ahead of us. And so today we're going to run through some kind of tactics and suggestions and insights that can help give you more visibility and control over, how your agent bill is being accumulated. So my name is Eleanor Treharne-Jones, and I'm the CEO of Bigeye, the enterprise AI trust company. And I'm joined today by two fantastic speakers, Egor Gryaznov, the field CTO and co-founder here at Bigeye, and Rob Berg, who is the principal and director of applied AI consulting at Perr&Knigh. Egor, please do spend a couple of minutes and give us some introduction to your background.
Would love to. Great to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Egor. As Eleanor mentioned, I am the co-founder and field CTO here at Bigeye. I have been in the data space my whole career. Prior to starting Bigeye, I was one of the first people called a data engineer at Uber, where my team was responsible for managing the data warehouse and all building tooling around it, which also included performance management, cost management, and the like. As the world is moving into AI as a primary consumption model. AI is creating a whole new set of challenges around cost management, data access management, and those are the kinds of problems that I'm excited to help a lot of our customers solve today.
And Rob, thank you for joining us today. Would love to hear a little bit more about what brought you to this.
Yeah, certainly, and I appreciate you inviting me today. I had the applied AI consulting practice at Perr&Knigh, as Eleanor noted. We're about 175 person actuarial and regulatory compliance consulting firm who serves primarily the insurance industry and kind of allied service providers. I started our operations and technology consulting practice way back in 2006. I've been in consulting for about 30 years altogether. And in my current role, I'm actually really occupying three different seats. I'm a buyer of AI products and services. I'm an operator of them for some of our internal staff. I operationalize a lot of our AI ideas. And I'm also the one who explains the bill when it comes to our CEO. So I'm here today as a guy who was surprised by a bill and really had to dig down and figure out what was going on. So I'll share some of that with you today.
Thank you. I'm often the one receiving the bill at the end of the month and asking for the explanation. So we bring all perspectives to the table. I started with a couple of statistics. What's just to kick us off, Egor, what's the single most surprising AI cost statistic that you've seen recently?
The most interesting statistic to me is the speed with which AI budgets are being consumed. It actually about every couple of weeks, I see an actually fairly public article claiming that a major company has run through its AI budget. Uber, my former employer, actually that was, I think, one of the first ones I saw where they ran through their whole annual budget by May for AI, and then that became a bit of a crisis management situation for the team there. It's and that statistic is interesting for two different reasons. One is that AI is actually turning into a major budget line item. Whereas if you look at a couple of years ago, sure, everyone gets a couple of ChatGPT licenses and then we all move on. But now, as AI is becoming a much more dominant player in day-to-day operations within organizations, you're seeing a lot of organizations have to shift to more on-demand cost models, more API-based models rather than just buying ChatGPT seats. And that along with the difficulty with which it is to estimate how much AI is going to cost. I think we at a previous a session, I was talking to someone about how AI is more of a viral growth thing than a top-down mandate nowadays. When your coworker sees is doing something interesting with AI and you ask them, hey, what are you doing? How are you automating these processes? They show you, now you're an adopter, and then that just grows and multiplies organically within an organization. And that kind of viral growth combined with, honestly, a lot of the labs having to start making money on their models and not giving them away for free, is leading to a difficulty in terms of forecasting how much AI spend needs to be. And therefore, a lot of teams are now looking to have more reactive solutions to just understand what is even happening and then turning those into proactive solutions around, well, if this is the agent that's we're spending a lot of money on, then how do we optimize that? How do we, make it more efficient? And so that's definitely an interesting trend in larger organizations.
Yes. So Uber blowing through the budget in the first 5 months. Rob, what's a AI statistic that surprised you this year?
Well, our own. I mean, the fact that we had equipped our staff with ChatGPT accounts. We had an enterprise account, $30 per month per user. Easy math. But when the bill came, it was 3.5 times what we had expected, and we had to figure out why. The reason really came down to 2 or 3 people out of a 175-person organization that spoke for about 40% of that additional spend. So what the heck is going on? So that led to a bunch of insights I guess we'll get into as we talk today. The other statistic, I know you asked me for one, but I'm going to give you two today, is that the FinOps Foundation, a great organization with a lot of crucial information around AI FinOps now, recently completed a survey, and they found that just 2 years ago, something like, I think it was 30 or 31% of AI practitioners had a mandate really to pay attention to AI spend. And to the points that both of you had made earlier, we're waking up, and this year it's 98%. So that's a statistic that's jarring. Like that many more people are finally taking note because they got the bill. A lot of it was also spurred by, there was a news item not that long ago, an unnamed company, and I know why they wanted to remain anonymous, because they were surprised by a bill of a different order of magnitude than the one I got, and they received a $500 million bill from Anthropic for a month's worth of token use. So that will tend to wake you up quite a bit. And that goes to the token maxing that you referenced earlier.
Yes, I mean, it's amazing that just 3 months ago we were talking about token maxing,
Yeah.
and engineers were being assessed on the amount of tokens they were using as an indication of productivity. That has all moved on very, 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 very quickly.
Yeah, Goodhart's law, right? When a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric, right? So that's what we saw.
So as we start to dig in, as everyone has their estimates, they do a pilot in a very kind of safe, controlled environment, and then push that agent into production, and things start to look very different, and the unpredictability comes in. So, Rob, what's different about how an agent spends tokens when it's starting to make decisions on real data versus when it's running in that demo pilot?
Oh, the pilot is controlled. I mean, it's when you're moving from a controlled pilot to production, the actual context grows. What's being consumed by the large language model is growing because every prompt response turn is resent through the whole conversation. So the 10th turn can cost several times what the first turn cost for getting the same answer. And the agent will loop. So a chat query is a single call. The user controls it. I send a prompt through, I get a response, and I can leave it right there. But an agent has a goal, and the agent will tap into whatever tools it has available. So it may have, web searches available. It may have vector stores, data retrieval available to it. It may have other tools available. And it's going to iterate through, loop through, based on the instructions that it's been given. And each loop is going to include the context of the conversation. It's going to include the prompt itself, the system prompt, and it can iterate through, ad nauseum until it gets to the particular goal. So you could have 10 or 20 of those iterations for a single task. You also have the compute cost, which is something that's often overlooked. We're talking about AI, but that doesn't mean the compute cost goes away. You're still paying for hours of compute time. And that may wind up, like if you're using Databricks or Snowflake, for example, that's going to wind up on someone else's bill. It may be invisible to the department head who is paying attention to the AI bill, if you will.
Is there a kind of rule of thumb you've seen as to kind of what that leap is from a pilot to production, what the typical scale is as people start to look at how they might predict that?
I don't know if there's a rule of thumb, but it's probably an order of magnitude or more. You had referenced Gartner's study. I think I'm familiar with that one. It's from this past March. And they said agentic workflows consume like 5 to 30 times the tokens per task of just a chatbot by itself doing the same job. And if you have multiple agents strung together, you'll have a multiple of that. It could be, I think in that report, it was like 50 to 100 times as a multiplier. But again, you have pilots measure the cost per prompt. Production is looking at the cost per resolved task. So they're not the same thing. So there's no multiplier that can convert one into the other. That's probably why we're having this conversation today. It's like the answer is really to establish good governance and monitor and control the usage, do evaluations rather than just pick a number as a rule of thumb, if you will. Because yours is going to be different than mine. And not only that, within an organization, based on the use case, those multiples are going to be different as well. So
you talked about the difference between, a chatbot versus, a kind of multi-step agent. Egor, tell us more about, what happens in that jump from pilot to production between those two use cases. We won't get into whether they're both agents or not. We'll ignore that. We'll put that one to one side, but those two scenarios.
Yeah, so if you think about the specific use cases that someone's looking for in either of these examples, they're a little bit different. The chatbot style agents, often, if you think about ChatGPT or Claude Chat or a lot of the AI-driven analytics agents, they're all focused around I'm going to take a question, I'm going to search my corpus of information, maybe look up some extra external data, and I'm going to answer the question that is handed to me. The outcome of that chatbot style agent is the answer to the specific question, and you can then measure the efficiency and the accuracy of those answers. For a fully autonomous multi-step agent, typically the outcome becomes some kind of action in a external system, maybe multiple actions, maybe an artifact that becomes an output. And I know that the lines are starting to blur quite a bit between things like co-work. But the jump is different because for the single question comes in, answer comes out, a chatbot style agent, you're having a much smaller surface area that the agent can operate over. Therefore, to Rob's point, the context is limited. You're probably not going to fill up a million token context window just by looking up information to answer a question. However, for a multi-step autonomous agent, I'm thinking a great example here is Claude Code or anything that is, any of the coding agents nowadays. They do multiple loops between I'm going to read the code base, I'm going to write some code, I'm going to run a test, I'm going to look at the test results, and then rinse and repeat. These agents then are building up their context as they go. And it's very easy to quickly take that, have that whole context. And as soon as I then prompt it again to make a small change, to Rob's point, whole context gets sent over. And all of a sudden, the token cost of that agent is just ballooning. And so the jump from pilot to production for a chatbot style agent is going to be much smaller. Maybe, sure, you're getting access to production data instead of POC pilot data, which might be larger. So there are some implications there. But let's say that's 2x, whereas in a multi-step process, that may be orders of magnitude higher than what you would get in pilot.
Thank you. Moving on to kind of looking at perhaps optimizing for the infrastructure stack, a lot of FinOps tooling at the moment is focused on, choosing the right model for the right task. Rob, how do you think when you're advising your clients on, when they need a kind of frontier model and which model they might need and how do they think about that?
Yeah, I mean it's really heuristics and experience. It's again every organization will have a different trigger to escalate to a more a superior model, and within an organization there'll be those triggers as well. So I'd say really in practice we tell our clients let's look at 30, 40, 50 specific cases, real cases out of the workflow, not synthetic data, right? Stuff that's real. Grade what correct output looks like. So you need some rubric or something to say this is a 1 and this is a 5. This is typically what we do. So we'll have a rubric. Here's the expected result. Here's what we need the result to be. And we look at the pass rate for each and the cost for each case. And you'll find that the cheap model often handles, it's like the Pareto principle. You see, it'll handle 70, 80% of the cases before you have to escalate. But the key is finding out what that trigger is. So the hiccups that you find, those 1s and 2s instead of those 5s that need escalation, inform the rules for escalation to that superior model. And it's, the user's specific error tolerance that's going to dictate, when that routing takes place, when that trigger is triggered and the routing takes place. It's not a particular benchmark. So 90%, right, may be good for an internal memo. 90% may be terrible, will be terrible for like an aircraft part or a medical diagnosis, for example. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious how you then scale that once you've built the rubric, once you've kind of got a good understanding. How do your clients then tend to operationalize that within their businesses?
I mean, you need some kind of eval suite or eval platform where you look at costs per model, cost per cost per task completed, fully completed, including any human intervention that needs to take place, and optimize on those numbers. But
Which gives them a
there's got
benchmark from which to start to kind of build that out
Yeah, I
internally.
mean, you create exactly. I mean, where you start is your personal benchmark, and then looking at that particular benchmark and looking like we had done. Our benchmark was a high cost.
Mm.
Then we applied specific techniques, methods to reduce the cost, and it was pretty effective actually. Our techniques were pretty effective, but we had to formally and formalize and operationalize an evaluation process, if you will. So,
Igor, the model is one component that's driving cost, but another one is, often the data. And so you'll find that there's a particular agent that's kind of just hammering one particular data set. How do you start to attribute cost to the data as well as the model?
That's a great point. Actually, reminds me of a story we were talking. I was speaking with somebody who was rolling out new agents, and their biggest challenge was that they found that someone had runaway costs because exactly what you mentioned, Eleanor. That person was going to this it was an analytics agent and asking a question. And every time they would ask a clarifying question or a drill down, that agent would go to exactly the same data set, pull the whole data set back in, rerun it, and then and now all of a sudden your, context balloons, your tokens are ballooning, and honestly, the answers are just getting less accurate at that point. But the this is tricky because at this point, all agents are actually accessing external data. Very few models are operating purely on their own system prompt plus their own knowledge. It is all agentic AI applications and tools today are referencing external data, pulling that in. And so it's important to be able to track what data is being accessed and by conversation, by turn within that conversation. So then you can start getting a picture of what is performing well, what is not. Another great example is I was speaking with someone who has a data model that their agents have an access to, but also the agents have access to the raw data within their warehouse. And the goal was to find out, well, which agents are accessing the raw data because that's clearly less efficient. It's not cleaned up. It is probably lower quality and harder to reason about than my model data. But if they want to find out what patterns they see there, build out new models, update the agents to point to those models and say, great, here is a much faster, more efficient, more clean way of accessing that same data. And so it all boils down to that visibility. What are agents accessing and how can you do sort of bulk analytics around exactly what data sets are being accessed for which purpose, so then you can drive your agents to, faster, cheaper data accesses.
So it sounds like the new norm you're describing is that people need to be continuously monitoring what data an agent is accessing in
Yep.
order that they can get kind of real-time visibility versus waiting for that bill at the end of the month.
Exactly. And a lot of AI governance tools or AI observability and governance tools have focused on the prompts in and out. But the data is really what's important because the data is what the agent is using to generate its response. And oftentimes that's the most overlooked point. It's not just about a prompt came in, worked for 30 minutes and then an answer came out. During that 30 minute, it may have accessed hundreds of different data sets, and without understanding what those are, it would be really hard to understand why it took 30 minutes or why it cost so much.
You've given us a couple of examples, but are there any particular data access patterns that are a leading indicator of cost spikes or things that people should be thinking about?
The raw unmodeled data is probably the best one. That if you're seeing changes in what kind of data your agent's accessing, then it could just be making a bad decision. It could be reading something that you don't want it to read even. So beyond even cost, there's a whole governance and sensitivity layer that we're not even going to get into on this call. But the making sure it's not accessing something brand new. I think the other one is just repeated accesses to the same table within a single conversation or a same file within a single conversation. If the agent, every time it needs to drill down into some, answer a follow-up question, has to then re-access it and rerun a query and re-pull the file in, then it's probably doing something inefficient. And that is when it's good to then say, great, what are people asking that is causing an agent to do this? And then how can you bypass that, whether that be by changing the data that it's accessing or by changing the system prompt itself?
We're getting close to governance. Rob, you said at the very beginning that, governance is really key to this in terms of, your overall strategy. As you you've talked about monitoring, cost saving strategies against a baseline. What does establishing that baseline look like?
So I'll speak to our experience and I can try to extrapolate from that. But for us, it was just finally paying attention, right? Finally, just getting that bill, and then like I said, we gave everybody a ChatGPT account. We provided training. And like every good innovative culture, we kind of let them do their thing, which was a mistake. The bill came in, like I said, at about 3.5 times what we had expected. And that happened a couple of months in a row because we were scratching our heads over it initially. But that became the baseline from which we kind of sought to understand what our token spend was and why. And then we trained our staff to be mindful of how they're using their accounts, like model selection things. People were just defaulting to the frontier model, which again, if you're drafting an email reply or even a blog post or something like that, you don't need Fable 5 to do that, and that gets expensive. Prompt compression, making the prompts more concise. These were some of the techniques we applied. Using projects instead of uploading documents to Igor's point, so that you're not constantly sending 200-page underwriting manuals with the prompt, which was the case in our situation. So we discovered that baseline after the fact, and we responded with education, and it's been pretty effective. So,
so many people are in this situation. Some people have already got the ballooning costs. Some people currently have agents in, a pilot stage and are looking to scale and want to do it without learning from the experience of everyone before them. So if someone is about to start scaling out their agentic program, what are 2 or 3 questions that they absolutely have to be able to answer before they do that? Rob, do you want to?
yeah, sure. I mean, a couple, I guess, come to mind. What does a completed task cost? I said this earlier, and it's not just the token cost; it's the human cost as well. And look at that versus what just the human or rules engine driven equivalent would be. So that's the first question. Are you paying attention to that? The next one, Igor spoke to this a bit. What's the worst case in 24 hours if a loop, misbehaves? And what stops it? So every agent needs a spend ceiling. It needs a cap on the number of retries. And it needs some sort of kill switch also. So, and this goes to design, not just token costs. It's how you're designing a solution. And the third question, I would guess, that's kind of not engineering related, is who gets the call at 3 a.m. on a Sunday when an agent's gone rogue on you and they've got to hit the kill switch. So those things. And after that's answered, you have the standard engineering stuff. Have you established retry limits? Are you using retrieval instead of whole documents? Are you sending summaries of the conversational turns through instead of putting the whole conversation through with every prompt, every turn? And do you have this kind of model escalation triggers defined that start with an economical model to hopefully knock out the 70 or 80% of cases and then escalate accordingly from there to accomplish whatever your quality threshold is?
Igor, same question to you, but perhaps focused on what the data and engineering leader should be able to answer before they push these to scale.
Yeah, I find it interesting, Rob, that you went to the sort of how do I prevent the worst case scenario, which I think that the long tail is truly the scarier part and probably what does end up costing, $5 million in a month.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of proactive visibility and analysis work that needs to just happen on a day-to-day basis. I think there's a lot going back to, from a data perspective, if an agent is underperforming, that may not actually show up in the costs as a giant spike or as something that is going to run for 24 hours. But if all of a sudden you're seeing that same agent went from, spending like 50 cents on a particular task to now it spends $2 on a task. May not raise any flags, but all of a sudden at scale, when you're performing the same task hundreds or thousands of times a day, that adds up. And understanding what happened during that flip from 50 cents to $2 per task. That is oftentimes there are 2 reasons for that. One is you've changed the agent itself. So you've changed what data it has access to. You've changed the prompt or the behavior of it. Or 2, the underlying data has changed and the agent is trying to actively work around you. I think a great example of this is I've used Snowflake's Cortex Code agent to do some work in our Snowflake environment. It found a data set. It spent a solid minute looking through that data set. Then it said, I actually don't think this is the right one. I'm going to go try again and find a different one. Then it went back and spent more time trying to find other data sets for it to work through. And it actually had the right data set, it just had the wrong instructions. So this kind of what goes back to probably should have a better prompt for it. Um, but that can drastically increase costs because now I'm just spending more time, more tokens, and the agent is making a decision for me and trying to work around me because it thinks I'm incorrect. And if I can see that at scale happening, and I can see that, oh, this data set was never accessed before, and all of a sudden, in the last 3 days, the same agent is accessing a secondary data set that I didn't expect it to, that may be indicative of the either one, the underlying data set is wrong, or two, the agent just doesn't understand the semantics and context around it and isn't using that to its full effect. And so I guess that's the last piece of advice from data team is providing that context and that semantics to that agent about the data that it's accessing is going to short circuit a lot of these kinds of problems. And so having very clear, commentary and context around each data set that the agent has access to will allow it to make better, faster, cheaper decisions than anything else would.
Another point that you made me think of is that we've all talked about escalating costs, but actually, if you've got good AI FinOps practices in place, you can also spot if an agent that was previously costing you, $2 a query stops costing you anything at all. And that may be an indication that the agent is no longer operating effectively or as expected. And so you're managing costs, but also you're trying to manage agent performance and outcomes and business value. And so good FinOps visibility can help you give a good indicator that you may have a problem there as well.
Yep.
Rob, when you're working with clients, what's a red flag that the team is kind of building agents for the sake of building agents or scaling for the sake of scaling when perhaps some of the use cases haven't yet been proven out? What are the things you listen for?
Well, I mean, the story from earlier is instructive. Spending $500 million, I'm sorry, in a month, because they're measuring the wrong thing. So what are they measuring is the red flag. If they're measuring, a usage metric, like tokens consumed or the number of sessions run or the number of active seats they have, they're measuring the input and they're saying that's the result and that's going to get them into trouble. That's a huge red flag. If you've got a proven use case, you should be able to articulate what the cost per resolved task is, and how much of the task was completed by the agent without a human having to intervene. And then, like I said earlier, you need a good eval process in place. That's a red flag. They've got to have that designed into their AI system. I'd say if they pilot only with, the enthusiasts like us, and they don't extend the pilot to a general population within the organization, that's a problem because we know how to write a prompt and we know how to, not send a 300-page document with every prompt. So what is the general population doing in the pilot? I think is important. And finally, I guess this idea that, we'll deal with cost later. We'll just flip a switch. We'll just reduce the model. We'll whatever. That's bad. Again, it needs to be engineered into the design of the system up front, with the attendant observability, all the things that Egor was speaking about as well.
Rob brings up a good point of the general population, and what I've seen and what I've even found personally is that agents are magical because they just take a bunch of English commands and they will do something. But it is also important to know how to tell the agent what to do in a way that is going to be, conducive to a good outcome and a fast outcome and a cheap outcome. And I think there's a lot that has to, if we go into more of the softer side of agent development and rollout, it's training, it's enablement, it's teaching the organization how to use agents, what they're good for, how to prompt them. To your point, Rob, even just telling someone, hey, the agent already has memory, do not send the same thing over and over again. Just saying that statement to the whole organization might save you quite a bit down the road because people are just going to remember that. And so I think part of this is being proactive in teaching people and enabling people on how to best use AI. And then to my earlier point, the flip side is then make sure they're actually doing the things that you told them to do and do that monitoring and understand retroactively what is actually happening in those conversations.
I think it's really interesting that a lot of the AI leadership roles and teams that are being established now are much more coming under the banner of AI enablement, and seeing that and kind of literacy and as being a critical component of AI success. And from what you both are saying, that's going to be one of the biggest things you can do to actually help manage some of your FinOps concerns as well. Happy to take any questions, so please do add them to the chat, and I will ask our great panelists. Egor, as you look at the different platforms available, Snowflake, Databricks, we've talked about a number of them, Copilot, Claude, are there any differences between those platforms that people should be aware of or be thinking about?
The biggest difference is how flexible is the platform and how much is it going to do on its own. So I think I'm gonna compare and contrast, let's say a Snowflake or a Databricks with something like Claude Code or GitHub Copilot. You are in the Snowflake and Databricks world, you have an agent with a limited set of data that it can access with a specific, typically it's almost a required semantic layer many of the times, especially for the analytics agents, that kind of forces you into a pattern of create more context for the data that I'm about to access. Tell me what I'm supposed to be doing and much less ambiguity. And the less ambiguity an agent has, the cheaper it is, the faster the answers are, but also the smaller the scope of the potential outcomes. And so great for pointed questions, maybe answering questions about a specific domain or for a specific set of users within the organization. If you contrast this with something like just a ChatGPT, a Claude, or a coding agent like Claude Code, you then are getting into agents that have access to anything you've given it access to. I mean, even my own ChatGPT, if I give it access to Google Drive, it's going to go search Google Drive. It's going to search my whole Google Drive for whatever it can find. And so the breadth of questions I can ask it are much larger, but because of that, it doesn't actually know what exactly I want. It doesn't have clearer instructions other than what I'm sending in that one prompt and the tools that I'm giving it. And then it has to infer a lot of things in between. And so the more ambiguity there is within an agent's operating model, the higher the costs are going to be. And honestly, the more variable the outputs are going to be from that agent.
That makes sense. Looking to the future, which is always dangerous in this AI world, not a world where you really want to make a lot of predictions. If only we had AI's confidence, it would be great. But where do you think AI FinOps is going to evolve as a category a year from now? We've already talked about the shift from token maxing to AI FinOps being a kind of primary part of an executive role. So, Rob, how do you think this category is going to evolve?
It's emerged as a result, out of necessity, like so many other things, and it will continue to do so. The party's over. We have to start demonstrating ROI. We all had fun for 2 years or 3 years. I had a lot of fun building, vibe coding apps and building workflows and doing all sorts of things. But now they've got to help the people who need to get the work done. So in that regard, we need to pay attention to ROI, return on investment. And if it's not there, it obviates the need for AI in a particular process. If it is there, well, great, we're all in. We've seen it in small instances, anecdotally, but now it needs to be scaled to the enterprise, and that's why a good FinOps discipline is critical. Just looking at the various layers, not just looking at the bill that comes in from OpenAI or Anthropic, but again, looking at the human cost, looking at the compute costs, the connectivity, all the other things that go with any technology and any business process need to be evaluated, measured, monitored, adjusted, et cetera, and get into that same continuous improvement loop that we've talked about for 30 years. But now AI is another tool in the toolkit. How is that impacting it? And that's the discipline of AI FinOps. So increasingly important.
We should have called this webinar "The Party's Over. We have to show ROI."
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Yes.
Egor, where do you think will be, what kind of tooling and things will companies be looking for in 12 months' time?
Um, if you look at how FinOps has evolved in other parts of engineering across both infrastructure cost management, there's a lot of tools around even data warehouse cost management. The most important thing that I think has come out of all of the evolution of these tools is the granularity and the dimensions that you can slice and dice all of your costs across. Today, cost management for AI is very rudimentary. I have a cost dashboard per user in my OpenAI or Anthropic account organization. I might have it broken down by agent, but that's about it. There is not a lot of granularity in terms of how I can slice and dice and find out what is actually driving all my costs. And this is a well understood domain because we've spent a lot of time as a industry trying to figure out how do we determine what is driving cost anomalies, but we haven't been able as AI is growing, we haven't caught up with the type of context and the type of dimensions that we want. And so I truly believe that data access, what kind of source systems is it doing, what kind of operations is the agent trying to do in order to answer the question. If we can as we start qualifying those and quantifying those and storing those alongside all of the cost attributes, we're going to get a lot better, faster insights into what is driving costs. And I think that's where we have to be in the next year. Otherwise, it's not going to be precise enough and it'll be a on or off switch, and that's just not reasonable.
Thank you so much, Egor and Rob. We've come to the end of our 45 minutes. Thank you for spending that time with me and the audience here today to kind of dig into where we are now and what particular strategies people can take in order to manage this better, both in terms of preparation, governance, tooling. And I do know that, Rob, you have a workbook that you use with your clients that you're happy to share with people who've attended the webinar. And so we'll be sharing that with attendees after the event. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Egor.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Have a great
Thank you.
You too.